There is something quietly powerful about understanding human nature. Not the surface version that people show in public, but the deeper instincts that drive attraction, loyalty, fear, ambition, and desire. When you truly begin to see people as they are, not as they pretend to be, your entire world changes. Influence stops being an accident. Attraction stops being luck. Leadership stops being about titles. It becomes a matter of perception, timing, and emotional intelligence. Human beings are not moved by logic alone. They are moved by feeling. They are drawn to strength, mystery, confidence, and control. Most people spend their lives trying to be liked. But those who understand deeper psychological dynamics focus instead on being respected, desired, and remembered. And there is a very important difference between those two paths. One of the first principles to understand is that people are naturally self-interested. This is not a negative judgment, it is simply reality. Every person filters the world through one question: how does this affect me? If you want someone to move toward you, support you, admire you, or even love you, you must first understand what they want, not what you want from them. When you speak to someone's desire, you gain their attention. When you make them feel important, you gain their interest. When you align yourself with their ambition, you gain their loyalty. Attraction is rarely about appearance alone. It is about perceived value. People are drawn to those who appear scarce, confident, and emotionally controlled. Think about it carefully. The person who is always available, always agreeable, always eager to please, rarely becomes deeply desired. But the one who has standards, who is selective, who does not rush to prove themselves, that person carries quiet magnetism. Scarcity increases value. Emotional control signals strength. And strength creates attraction. Another subtle truth is that people admire what they cannot easily obtain. When something feels too accessible, it becomes ordinary. When it feels slightly out of reach, it becomes intriguing. This is why mystery works. Not deception, but restraint. You do not reveal everything about yourself immediately. You allow curiosity to grow. You allow others to invest effort in understanding you. That effort increases their attachment. Control over your emotions is one of the strongest forms of power. Most individuals react impulsively. They show anger when offended. They show desperation when ignored. They show insecurity when challenged. The one who remains calm gains the upper hand. When you do not react predictably, you become difficult to manipulate. When you maintain composure, you project stability. And stability is deeply attractive because it feels safe and strong at the same time. There is also an important lesson in perception. Reality matters less than what people believe to be true. You may be talented, intelligent, capable, but if others do not perceive it, it has little influence. On the other hand, someone who confidently communicates their strengths often appears more powerful than someone who quietly possesses them. This does not mean boasting. It means understanding how to shape impressions. How you present yourself, how you speak, how you carry your body, all of it sends signals long before your words are processed. People are also drawn to ambition. Not loud ambition, but focused direction. When someone has a clear path, a clear goal, and steady progress, others naturally feel compelled to associate with them. Direction suggests future power, and humans instinctively gravitate toward those who appear to be rising. If you want to attract others, build yourself first. Improve your skills. Expand your knowledge. Increase your value. When you grow, people notice. At the same time, you must understand the role of fear. Not fear in a cruel or aggressive sense, but the subtle awareness that you are not to be taken lightly. Pure kindness without boundaries often invites disrespect. Pure dominance without warmth invites resistance. The balance lies in being fair but firm, generous but not weak, approachable but not easily controlled. When people know there are limits to how they can treat you, they respect you more deeply. Another overlooked truth is that emotional dependency weakens influence. The moment someone senses that you need them more than they need you, the dynamic shifts. Power flows toward independence. This does not mean isolation. It means maintaining your own center. Your happiness should not depend on a single person's approval. When you are complete within yourself, others feel your strength, and they are drawn to it. Communication plays a silent but powerful role. The strongest communicators listen more than you understand how to position yourself in their mind. Influence becomes less about persuasion and more about alignment. Timing is equally critical. Even the right action at the wrong moment fails. Human emotions fluctuate. Opportunities appear and disappear quickly. The ability to wait patiently and then act decisively is rare. Impulsive people lose leverage. Patient observers gain it. When you combine patience with preparation, your actions carry more impact. There is also the art of controlled generosity. Giving strategically builds loyalty, but giving excessively creates expectation. When you occasionally reward, support, or uplift someone, they associate you with positive emotion. But if you give endlessly without selectivity, your value decreases. Humans tend to protect and cherish what feels earned, not what feels automatic. Above all, influence begins internally. If you are easily shaken, easily offended, easily flattered, or easily discouraged, others sense it. Stability, discipline, and self-control create an invisible aura. People may not consciously understand why they are drawn to you, but they feel it. Calm confidence is magnetic. Most people move through life unaware of these dynamics. They react instead of strategize. They reveal instead of withhold. They chase instead of attract. But when you begin to see the subtle patterns beneath human interaction, you stop playing emotionally and start playing intelligently. And yet, understanding human psychology is only the beginning. True mastery lies in knowing how to apply these principles without becoming cold, manipulative, or disconnected. Because influence without wisdom can quickly turn into isolation. The real question is not just how to attract people, but how to make them willingly stay aligned with you. To understand that, we need to look deeper into how power, desire, and perception quietly shape every relationship, and how small strategic shifts can completely transform your position in any social or personal dynamic. If you look closely at any relationship, whether romantic, professional, or social, you will notice that power is always present. Not loud power, not aggressive control, but subtle influence. Someone always cares slightly more. Someone always invests slightly more energy. And whoever controls their emotional investment usually controls the direction of the connection. This does not mean becoming cold or distant. It means understanding balance. When you give attention, reassurance, or availability, you unintentionally reduce your perceived value. Human psychology is strange in this way. We appreciate what feels limited. We question what feels too easy. When your time feels precious, people treat it as precious. When your approval feels earned, people protect it. One of the quiet rules of influence is unpredictability. Not chaos, not inconsistency, but controlled variation. If people can predict your reactions every time, they begin to take you for granted. If they know you will always forgive instantly, always agree immediately, always respond quickly, your presence becomes background noise. But when your responses are thoughtful, measured, and sometimes delayed, people begin to pay attention. Attention creates importance. Emotional rhythm matters more than constant intensity. Think about how desire works. It grows in space. It builds in absence. When someone is constantly present, there is no room for imagination. And imagination is one of the strongest forces in attraction. Allowing moments of distance, silence, or mystery gives others the opportunity to think about you. And the more they think about you, the more psychologically invested they become. There is also the power of restraint in conversation. Most people talk too much about themselves. They overshare. They try to impress. They try to prove their worth through endless explanation. But true confidence does not rush to explain itself. When you speak less but with clarity, your words carry more weight. Silence, when used correctly, creates authority. It makes others lean in. It makes them wonder what you are thinking. And curiosity is the beginning of fascination. Another important principle is selective validation. If you compliment everyone equally, your words lose impact. But when your approval is rare and sincere, it becomes powerful. Humans crave recognition. When you acknowledge someone's strength, effort, or uniqueness in a way that feels genuine and not exaggerated, you create a strong emotional bond. They begin associating you with feelings of competence and value. That association builds attachment. At the same time, you must never appear dependent on someone's validation. The moment you seek constant reassurance, you shift. It does not beg to be noticed. There is also strategy in how you handle disrespect or challenges. Many people react instantly when they feel slighted. They argue, they defend, they escalate. But emotional reactions often reduce authority. A calm, measured response, or sometimes no response at all, can be far more powerful. When you refuse to engage in unnecessary conflict, you show control. And control commands respect. Fear and admiration often sit close together. Not fear in a threatening sense, but the awareness that you cannot be easily manipulated or disrespected. When people sense that you have boundaries, real ones, not just words, they adjust their behavior. Boundaries are not announced loudly. They are demonstrated consistently. The first time someone crosses a line and you calmly but firmly correct it, you redefine the dynamic. From that moment forward, they understand your value. Another subtle rule involves social proof. Humans are influenced by how others respond to you. If you are respected by others, valued by others, desired by others, it increases your perceived worth. This is why building strong networks, maintaining a composed public image, and carrying yourself with quiet confidence matters. People often decide how to treat you based on how they see others treating you. But perhaps one of the deepest insights is this: people are drawn to those who represent something aspirational. When you embody growth, discipline, ambition, or emotional maturity, you become a symbol of progress. And many people are unconsciously attracted to symbols of progress because they hope some of that energy will influence their own lives. This is why self-improvement is not selfish. It is strategic. You must also understand desire at a psychological level. Desire intensifies when there is challenge. Not impossible challenge, but meaningful effort. If someone invests time, energy, or emotion into winning your attention, they value you more. Effort creates attachment. This is why instantly giving everything, your full attention, your full availability, your full vulnerability, can sometimes weaken attraction. Gradual revelation creates depth. However, there is a fine line between mystery and manipulation. The goal is not to deceive. It is to pace the unfolding of your personality. Think of it as allowing layers to reveal themselves naturally over time. This pacing keeps interactions alive. It prevents stagnation. It creates a sense of discovery. Confidence also comes from detachment from outcome. When you are overly focused on securing someone's approval or affection, your behavior becomes tense. People sense that tension. But when you are comfortable with either outcome, whether they stay or leave, you project calm authority. Ironically, this very detachment often makes them stay. And then there is the art of strategic absence. When you occasionally withdraw to focus on your own goals, passions, or growth, you remind others that your world does not revolve around them. This increases respect. It signals independence. Independence is one of the strongest magnets in human interaction because it suggests strength without neediness. Many individuals try to attract by becoming louder, more available, more expressive. But often the real power lies in refinement, in subtlety, in emotional discipline, the ability to read a room, to sense when to advance and when to retreat, to understand when silence speaks louder than words. Yet mastering these dynamics requires something deeper than technique. It requires self-awareness. If your actions are driven by insecurity, they will feel forced. If they are driven by internal strength, they will feel natural. The external strategy only works when the internal foundation is stable. The real transformation begins when you stop trying to control others and start mastering yourself. Because the person who controls their impulses, their emotions, and their reactions already holds a powerful advantage. From that position, influence becomes effortless rather than calculated. But there is still a deeper layer to understand, the layer where loyalty is built, where long-term devotion forms, and where influence turns into lasting authority rather than temporary attraction. And that requires exploring how trust, perception, and controlled vulnerability interact in ways most people completely overlook. There is a moment in every meaningful connection when attraction either deepens into loyalty or quietly fades away. Many people know how to create initial interest. Very few know how to sustain influence over time. The difference lies in understanding that long-term devotion is not built on intensity alone. It is built on emotional experience. People stay where they feel something strong and memorable follows. The real art lies in creating emotional contrast, moments of warmth mixed with moments of challenge, closeness balanced with independence. Trust plays a central role here, but trust does not mean revealing every weakness immediately. Controlled vulnerability is powerful. When you slowly allow someone to see selective depth, your principles, your struggles, your standards, they begin to feel privileged. Privilege strengthens bonds. Oversharing too quickly, however, removes that sense of earned intimacy. Emotional pacing matters. One subtle truth about loyalty is that people value what they work for. If someone invests time, effort, and emotional energy into earning your respect, they protect that investment. This is why effortless access often weakens long-term attachment. When attention, affection, or approval requires growth and consistency, it becomes meaningful. Effort creates pride. Pride strengthens commitment. Respect must always come before affection. Many try to win hearts through constant kindness alone. But without strength, kindness can feel fragile. Respect grows when your words align with your actions. When you maintain standards even under pressure. When you do not betray your own principles to please others. A person may enjoy attention, but they admire integrity. And admiration is deeper than enjoyment. There is also the quiet influence of emotional stability. Life brings stress, misunderstanding, competition, and uncertainty. In those moments, people naturally gravitate toward the calmest presence in the room. If you become that presence, the one who thinks clearly under pressure, your influence expands automatically. Stability creates reliance, and reliance builds authority without force. At the same time, you must understand the power of strategic unpredictability in long-term dynamics. Predictability in character is good. People should know your values are stable. But predictability in behavior can reduce excitement. Small variations in how you express affection, appreciation, or attention keep the connection alive. Surprise, when used thoughtfully, prevents emotional stagnation. Another overlooked principle is that admiration grows when you are seen progressing. Stagnation weakens attraction. Growth strengthens it. When someone observes you improving your skills, expanding your ambitions, refining your discipline, they subconsciously associate you with upward movement. Humans are drawn toward those who appear to be rising. Progress signals future security and opportunity. It is also important to recognize the role of silence in maintaining authority. Not every disagreement requires explanation. Not every criticism deserves defense. Sometimes the strongest position is to listen, acknowledge, and move forward without emotional escalation. Silence in the right moment communicates confidence. It shows that your identity is not easily shaken by external noise. Jealousy and competition must be handled carefully. While subtle social proof can enhance attraction, deliberate attempts to provoke jealousy often backfire. Artificial games create instability. True influence does not rely on manipulation. It relies on perceived value. When others naturally respect and appreciate you, there is no need for dramatic tactics. Quiet confidence is more sustainable than emotional games. Boundaries remain essential at every stage. Over time, people test limits, sometimes unconsciously. If small acts of disrespect go unaddressed, they grow. Correcting them calmly and early preserves the balance of power. This does not require anger. It requires clarity. The message is simple: respect is mutual, and it is non-negotiable. Another deeper layer of influence involves understanding fear of loss. Humans are wired to protect what they believe they might lose. When your presence feels meaningful but not guaranteed, others treat it carefully. If someone believes you will always stay no matter how they behave, complacency develops. But if your standards are clear and your independence is real, your presence becomes something to value. Detachment from outcome continues to play a powerful role here. When you are emotionally prepared for any result, whether someone stays loyal or walks away, you operate from strength. This inner security allows you to make decisions that protect your dignity rather than your fear. And dignity is deeply attractive. It is equally important to avoid becoming emotionally cold. Influence does not mean absence of warmth. In fact, genuine warmth makes strength more approachable. When people feel both your firmness and your humanity, they trust you more deeply. The combination of compassion and control creates a rare balance that few can resist. Long-term authority in any relationship comes from emotional discipline. Over time, they begin to relax in your presence. Stability fosters long-term trust. And beneath all these principles lies a final truth: the strongest form of attraction comes from self-mastery. When you no longer chase validation, when you no longer fear rejection, when you no longer compromise your standards for temporary approval, you become centered. That centered energy is powerful. It makes others curious. It makes them lean in. It makes them wonder what shapes such composure. In the end, influence is not about tricks. It is about understanding human instincts and refining your own behavior accordingly. It is about presenting value without arrogance, maintaining mystery without dishonesty, and enforcing boundaries without cruelty. It is about becoming someone whose presence feels rare. When you master these dynamics, you no longer need to persuade people to stay. They choose to. They feel drawn not because you demand attention, but because your energy commands it naturally. And once you realize that true power begins within, that attraction is a byproduct of discipline, emotional intelligence, and controlled presence, you begin to see every interaction differently. What once felt uncertain becomes strategic. What once felt emotional becomes intentional. From there, the game changes completely. There comes a stage where influence stops being about tactics and starts becoming about identity. At first, you consciously practice restraint, emotional control, selective availability. But over time, these behaviors either become natural extensions of who you are, or they collapse under pressure. The difference lies in whether you truly transformed internally, or simply memorized techniques. Real power is sustainable only when it is rooted in self-respect. If you do not genuinely value yourself, no strategy will save you. You may create temporary attraction. You may even command short-term admiration. But eventually, insecurity reveals itself in subtle ways, in over-explaining, in jealousy, in silent resentment, in the need to constantly prove yourself. People can sense internal instability even when words are polished. So the deeper layer of these principles is inner construction. When you invest in your competence, your health, your knowledge, your financial stability, your emotional discipline, you slowly remove desperation from your behavior. Desperation is the silent destroyer of attraction. It shows up when you tolerate disrespect to avoid being alone. It shows up when you chase someone who clearly pulls away. It shows up when your mood depends entirely on external validation. Strength, on the other hand, creates choice. And choice creates calmness. When you know you can walk away and still be whole, your posture changes. Your voice changes. Your timing changes. You stop reacting to every small shift in attention. You stop overanalyzing delayed responses. You stop negotiating your own boundaries. That calm self-assurance is deeply magnetic because it feels rare. Another powerful layer of influence lies in long-term positioning. Many people focus only on immediate wins, winning an argument, gaining quick attention, proving dominance in a moment. But short-term victories often damage long-term authority. If you embarrass someone publicly, they may comply temporarily but resent you privately. If you manipulate someone emotionally, they may stay briefly but withdraw trust. Sustainable influence requires thinking several moves ahead. Instead of asking, "How do I win now?" you begin asking, "How will this decision shape the dynamic 6 months from now?" This mindset alone separates impulsive personalities from strategic ones. Patience becomes an advantage. Silence becomes a tool. Restraint becomes strength. There is also something important about reputation. Over time, people form a consistent image of you. Are you emotionally steady? Are you fair? Are you unpredictable in negative ways? Are you someone who reacts from ego? Your long-term influence depends on this image. Once established, reputation works for you silently. People approach you with a certain level of respect before you even speak. This is why self-control in small moments matters. The way you handle minor frustration teaches others how to treat you in major situations. The way you respond to gossip, criticism, or challenge shapes your perceived strength. Each small interaction either builds your authority or weakens it. Another critical layer involves understanding that not everyone deserves access to you. Many people struggle because they try to be universally liked. But universal approval is impossible, and chasing it dilutes your uniqueness. When you are selective about who enters your inner circle, you say it does not need constant comparison. It does not feel threatened by someone else's success. When you are secure, you can appreciate strength in others without feeling diminished. This calm acknowledgement of others' value actually increases your own. There is also a silent law of human psychology. People mirror the level of respect they receive. If you treat someone as capable, they often rise to that expectation. If you treat someone as inferior, they either withdraw or rebel. By subtly communicating high standards, both for yourself and for others, you elevate the environment around you. But perhaps the most powerful principle of all is this: the less you try to control outcomes, the more control you seem to have. When you cling tightly to results, your fear becomes visible. When you loosen your grip and focus on excellence in behavior instead of guaranteed outcomes, your presence feels grounded. Ironically, this grounded energy often draws outcomes toward you more easily than force ever could. And then there is legacy. Beyond attraction, beyond influence, beyond respect, what remains is the impact you leave on people's memory. Were you someone who inspired growth? Were you someone who modeled discipline? Were you someone who made others feel stronger in your presence? Long-term influence is not about dominating others. It is about shaping their standards quietly. When someone interacts with you and later thinks, "I need to raise my level," that is real power. When your absence creates a noticeable shift in energy, that is real presence. When people adjust their behavior simply because they know your expectations are higher, that is authority without noise. Over time, the need to attract fades because attraction becomes natural. You no longer strategize every word. You no longer analyze every interaction. Your habits carry you. Your boundaries protect you. Your growth sustains you. And what began as learning psychological dynamics transforms into something much deeper: mastery over self. That is the ultimate secret hidden beneath all the surface rules. Not manipulation. not games, but refinement, emotional discipline, strategic patience, independent strength, warmth balanced with firmness, mystery balanced with honesty, ambition balanced with calm. When these qualities merge, you do not need to convince anyone of your value. They feel it. And once someone feels your value, not because you demanded attention, but because your presence consistently reflects depth and control, the dynamic shifts permanently. From there, attraction is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you embody. At a certain point, something subtle begins to change inside you. You stop focusing on how to make people come closer, and you start thinking about who is worthy of coming closer. That shift alone transforms your entire energy. Instead of trying to win approval, you begin evaluating alignment. Instead of asking, "Do they like me?" you quietly ask, "Do they meet my standards?" And strangely, this calm evaluation increases your attractiveness even more. Because now, you are no longer operating from need. You are operating from choice. Choice is powerful. When people sense that you are choosing them, not clinging to them, they feel honored. When they sense that your attention is intentional, not automatic, they value it more deeply. Attention given freely to everyone feels ordinary. Attention given selectively feels meaningful. This is where the deepest layer of influence reveals itself, emotional independence combined with emotional depth. Many people misunderstand independence. They think it means detachment or emotional coldness. But true independence means you are capable of connection without losing yourself. You can care without collapsing. You can love without surrendering your dignity. You can support without becoming dependent. When you reach this state, your reactions slow down. You do not panic when someone withdraws slightly. You observe. You do not chase immediately. You assess. You allow space for others to reveal their intentions. And this patience gives you clarity that impulsive people never experience. Clarity protects you from manipulation. When you understand your own worth clearly, flattery does not intoxicate you. When you understand your own direction, distraction does not easily derail you. When you understand your own boundaries, pressure does not easily bend you. This internal clarity creates a steady rhythm in your behavior. And that rhythm makes others feel both intrigued and secure. There is also something important about emotional contrast in long-term attraction. If you are always available, always warm, always predictable, the connection can become comfortable but uninspiring. It prevents complacency. However, this must be genuine. If you pretend to be busy or distant as a tactic, it eventually feels artificial. But if you are truly building something meaningful in your own life, your limited availability becomes natural. And natural scarcity is far more powerful than forced absence. Another mature realization is understanding when to walk away. Not every connection deserves effort. Not every misunderstanding deserves repair. Not every person deserves multiple chances. Strength sometimes means disengaging quietly without drama. When you leave without chaos, without begging, without revenge, you preserve your power. And often, your silence speaks louder than any final speech could. Walking away from what does not meet your standards reinforces your self-image. And your self-image shapes your future interactions. Each time you choose dignity over desperation, your internal confidence grows. That confidence changes how you speak, how you stand, how you negotiate, how you love. People respond to that shift immediately, even if they cannot explain why. Another key principle is emotional memory. People may forget your exact words, but they never forget how you made them feel. If your presence consistently evokes respect, calm, inspiration, and subtle challenge, you become unforgettable. If your presence evokes chaos, insecurity, and unpredictability, people eventually distance themselves. So every interaction becomes an opportunity to strengthen your emotional signature. Your tone, your pacing, your listening ability, your reactions, they all leave traces in others' minds. When those traces are steady and refined, your influence compounds over time. It is also important to understand that attraction is not about overpowering others. It is about creating a dynamic where they willingly invest. When someone feels that being connected to you elevates their own standards, they stay not out of fear, but out of aspiration. You become associated with growth. And growth is addictive. When your lifestyle reflects discipline, when your mindset reflects composure, when your decisions reflect foresight, people subconsciously feel that proximity to you will improve their own trajectory. This is one of the most powerful forms of magnetism, being seen as someone who represents upward movement. But this only happens when your actions are consistent. One moment of strength, followed by repeated emotional collapse, weakens the image. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds attachment. Attachment builds loyalty. Over time, you realize something profound. The more you focus on becoming rare, the less you need to seek attention. The more you refine your standards, the fewer people qualify, but the higher the quality of those who remain. Quantity decreases. Depth increases. And depth is where real influence lives. Eventually, attraction stops feeling like a strategy at all. It feels like a byproduct. You are no longer calculating when to reply or how to appear mysterious. You are simply grounded. You value your time. You respect your energy. You pursue your mission. And those who resonate naturally align with you. That is the final layer of these hidden rules. Not manipulation, not control, but disciplined self-construction. When you build yourself into someone who is emotionally stable, mentally sharp, physically disciplined, socially aware, and internally secure, you no longer chase dynamics. You shape them, without raising your voice, without forcing attention. People come closer because they feel something solid. And when you look back, you realize that the real secret was never about controlling others. It was about mastering your impulses, your fears, your reactions, and your standards. Once you master yourself, attraction is no longer something you learn. It becomes something you naturally radiate. In the end, everything circles back to one quiet truth: the way people treat you is deeply connected to the way you treat yourself. Not in words, but in standards. Not in appearance, but in boundaries. Not in confidence spoken loudly, but in confidence lived daily. When you truly internalize this, your behavior changes in subtle but powerful ways. You stop negotiating your non-negotiables. You stop explaining your worth to those who refuse to see it. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. And interestingly, the moment you stop shrinking, the right people begin stepping forward. There is a certain gravity to someone who knows their direction. It does not need to be announced. It is felt. When your days are structured around purpose instead of emotional drama, your conversations become sharper. Your decisions become cleaner. Your tolerance for chaos decreases. And this reduction of chaos increases your encounter someone who moves differently, someone steady, observant, patient. It creates contrast. And contrast draws attention. One of the most underestimated forms of power is emotional pace. Slowing down your reactions gives you leverage. When someone tries to provoke you and you pause before responding, you communicate control. When someone praises you and you accept it calmly instead of becoming overly excited, you communicate stability. When someone withdraws and you do not chase impulsively, you communicate independence. This emotional pacing forces others to adjust to you rather than you adjusting to them. And that shift changes the entire dynamic. Another mature realization is understanding that attraction is not about being everything to someone. It is about being distinctly yourself. When you dilute your personality to match everyone's expectations, you become forgettable. When you hold firm to your values, even if it means disagreement, you become defined. Definition creates identity. Identity creates memorability. Memorability creates influence. There is also a quiet strength in accepting loss. Many people lose their power because they fear losing others. But loss is inevitable in life. Some connections are seasonal. Some are lessons. Some are reflections of who you were, not who you are becoming. When you accept that not everyone will stay, you release the anxiety that makes you cling. And when you stop clinging, you become calmer. Calmness changes your voice. It changes your eye contact. It changes your posture. You begin speaking with less urgency and more certainty. You listen more carefully. You interrupt less. You respond instead of react. These small behavioral refinements compound over time, creating a presence that feels deliberate rather than scattered. Deliberate people feel powerful. Another important dimension is internal discipline. Attraction that is built only on charm fades. Attraction that is reinforced by discipline endures. When people see that your habits are consistent, that you wake up with purpose, that you honor commitments, that you manage your emotions instead of being ruled by them, admiration grows naturally. And admiration is stronger than infatuation. Infatuation is emotional. Admiration is structural. It rests on evidence. Evidence of character. Evidence of growth. Evidence of strength under pressure. You also begin to realize that silence is often more strategic than explanation. When misunderstood, you do not rush to correct every narrative. You allow time to reveal consistency. When criticized unfairly, you do not always defend immediately. You strengthen your actions. Over time, patterns speak louder than arguments. This long-term thinking separates reactive individuals from composed ones. There is a refinement that happens when you no longer try to win every emotional exchange. You start choosing which situations deserve energy. You stop arguing with those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop investing in one-sided dynamics. That conservation of energy allows you to pour more into your mission, your health, your growth. And growth continuously renews attraction. The deeper you move into self-mastery, the more you understand that influence is not about dominance. It is about gravity. Dominance forces attention. Gravity pulls it naturally. When your life has direction, when your emotions are regulated, when your standards are visible through action, you develop gravity. People feel it without being able to define it. At this stage, relationships become cleaner. You no longer tolerate subtle disrespect disguised as humor. You no longer chase inconsistent effort. You no longer confuse intensity with depth. You choose stability over thrill, substance over drama. And because you choose differently, you attract differently. Eventually, the need to apply rules disappears. What once felt like calculated behavior becomes instinct. You naturally pause before reacting. You naturally maintain mystery because you value privacy. You naturally enforce boundaries because you respect yourself. You naturally focus on purpose because you understand distraction is expensive. And others feel that maturity. The journey that began with understanding human psychology ends with understanding your own psychology. Your triggers, your weaknesses, your patterns. When you master those, no one can easily manipulate you. When you recognize your own fears, no one can easily exploit them. This internal clarity gives you freedom. Freedom to walk away without bitterness. Freedom to stay without insecurity. Freedom to love without losing identity. Freedom to lead without forcing authority. And that freedom is attractive in a way that no technique can replicate. In the quiet, comfortable in vulnerability, but only with those who have earned it. When you reach that state, attraction is no longer a pursuit. It is a consequence. You do not chase attention. You attract alignment. You do not demand respect. You embody standards. You do not manipulate emotions. You regulate your own. And in mastering yourself, you quietly master the dynamics around you. As you move deeper into this way of thinking, something even more subtle begins to happen. You stop seeing people as opponents to win over, and you start seeing dynamics as patterns to understand. That shift makes you calmer, sharper, and far less emotional in situations where most people lose control. When someone pulls away, instead of reacting with anxiety, you observe the pattern. When someone suddenly shows intense interest, instead of getting carried away, you assess consistency. When someone challenges you, instead of defending immediately, you evaluate intent. This habit of observation gives you a quiet advantage. Most people are driven by impulse. Very few are driven by awareness. Awareness allows you to see that attraction often rises when there is emotional space. Respect often rises when there is firmness. Curiosity often rises when there is restraint. And loyalty often rises when there is consistency. Once you recognize these patterns, you stop taking everything personally. Not every delay is rejection. Not every disagreement is disrespect. Not every silence is loss. Emotional maturity allows you to interpret behavior with patience instead of insecurity. And this patience alone separates you from the majority. There is also a deeper understanding that power in relationships is fluid. It shifts depending on who is more emotionally invested in the moment. But if you consistently maintain self-control, that power rarely slips far from you. Emotional self-regulation becomes your anchor. Think about how rare it is to meet someone who does not overreact. Someone who does not beg for attention. Someone who does not crumble under pressure. When you become that person, your presence feels steady in a world that feels unstable. Stability is magnetic because it feels safe. And safety is often more powerful than excitement. Excitement attracts quickly. Safety retains deeply. This is why the combination of strength and warmth is so important. Strength alone can feel intimidating. Warmth alone can feel weak. But when someone senses both in you, firmness in your standards and kindness in your delivery, they relax without losing respect. Another layer of mastery is learning the art of strategic investment. You do not give your full energy at the beginning. You match effort. You mirror consistency. You allow the other person to reveal their capacity before you increase your own. This pacing protects you from overcommitting too soon. It also increases perceived value. When people feel they are gradually earning deeper access to you, the connection becomes more meaningful. Human psychology attaches to progression. The feeling of unlocking deeper layers creates emotional reward. But when everything is available instantly, there is nothing left to build toward. At this stage, you also become highly selective with your emotional reactions. You understand that anger is expensive, jealousy is draining, desperation is visible. So instead of suppressing emotions, you manage them. You feel them, but you do not allow them to dictate your behavior. That distinction is crucial. Controlled emotion communicates strength. Uncontrolled emotion communicates vulnerability in its most fragile form. And yet, you are not emotionless. In fact, you become more emotionally intelligent. You listen more carefully. You pick up on tone shifts. You notice body language. You sense hesitation. This awareness allows you to respond in ways that feel precise instead of excessive. Precision builds authority. You also begin to understand that mystery is not about hiding who you are. It is about not overexposing yourself to those who have not earned that access. Privacy becomes a form of power, not because you are secretive, but because you value your inner world. When everything about you is immediately visible, there is no discovery, and discovery sustains interest. Over time, you develop a reputation, even if it is unspoken. People describe you as composed, as hard to read but easy to respect, as warm but not naive, as confident but not loud. That balanced image creates a subtle form of influence that works even when you are not present. And that is when you realize something important. The goal was never to control others. The goal was to elevate yourself to a point where control is unnecessary. When you stand, you do not need to chase. You do not need to argue. You do not need to prove. You simply maintain. Maintain your discipline. Maintain your emotional control. Maintain your growth. Maintain your direction. And the right people adjust to you. The final transformation is internal. You stop fearing loneliness because you enjoy your own company. You stop fearing rejection because you know your value is not universal, and it does not need to be. You stop fearing competition because you are not trying to outshine everyone. You are trying to refine yourself. This inner security changes your energy in ways that cannot be faked. Your walk becomes slower but more certain. Your speech becomes calmer but more deliberate. Your decisions become fewer but more impactful. Your circle becomes smaller but more aligned. And from that position, attraction is effortless. Because what people are truly drawn to is not manipulation. It is clarity. It is strength without aggression. It is ambition without desperation. It is warmth without weakness. It is independence without isolation. When you embody these qualities consistently, you no longer need rules. You become the standard. And when you become the standard, people either rise to meet you, or they quietly fall away. Either way, you remain centered. And that is the highest form of influence anyone can achieve. There is a quiet confidence that emerges when you finally understand that not everyone is meant to understand you. Earlier in life, many people exhaust themselves trying to be accepted in every room, appreciated by every person, validated in every interaction. But maturity brings a different realization. Influence does not come from universal approval. It comes from selective resonance. When you stop trying to fit everywhere, you start fitting perfectly somewhere. That shift removes pressure. You no longer perform. You no longer exaggerate your personality to gain attention. You no longer silence your opinions to avoid discomfort. Instead, you become grounded in your own identity. And identity, when stable, is incredibly attractive. People are drawn to those who seem internally decided. Indecision creates nervous energy. Constantly shifting opinions, values, or standards create instability. But when someone senses that you know what you stand for, even if they disagree with you, they respect it. Certainty signals strength. At this level, you also begin to understand the importance of long-term emotional discipline. It is easy to maintain composure for a day. It is easy to apply strategy for a week. But real power is measured over years. How do you respond when betrayed? When misunderstood? When overlooked? When replaced? Your reaction to loss reveals your depth. If you collapse, chase, or seek revenge, you weaken your position. But if you absorb the lesson, adjust your standards, and continue building your life without drama, you strengthen your reputation. Over time, people notice patterns. They see who remains stable and who reacts impulsively. Stability becomes your signature. Another layer of refinement is understanding silence as a filter. Not every thought needs expression. Not every emotion needs exposure. Silence allows you to observe more than others realize. It allows you to collect information without revealing your strategy. It allows others to fill space, and in filling that space, they often reveal their intentions. Listening more than you speak increases your awareness of power dynamics. You notice who seeks validation, who seeks control, who seeks attention, and when you see these motivations clearly, you are less likely to be manipulated by them. There is also a deeper understanding of value exchange. Every relationship operates on a form of exchange, emotional, intellectual, practical, or social. When the exchange becomes one-sided, imbalance grows. Mature influence requires recognizing imbalance early and adjusting calmly. Instead of complaining about lack of effort, you reduce your own effort. Instead of demanding attention, you redirect your focus. Instead of arguing about respect, you withdraw access. This quiet adjustment communicates standards without emotional escalation, and emotional restraint often speaks louder than confrontation. At this stage, your self-worth is no longer fragile. Compliments do not inflate you. Criticism does not deflate you. You begin to operate from internal evaluation rather than external reaction. That inner anchor stabilizes your behavior across different environments. Whether in a professional setting, a social circle, or an intimate relationship, your energy remains consistent. And consistency builds trust faster than charm ever could. Another realization emerges about attraction itself. Forcing connection creates tension. Allowing connection creates flow. Flow feels effortless. It does not require constant reassurance. It does not require emotional games. It does not require manipulation. It feels balanced. Mutual effort, mutual respect, mutual curiosity. When you have mastered yourself, you no longer fear losing someone who does not align with you, because you trust your ability to attract alignment again. This trust reduces desperation. And when desperation disappears, dignity rises. Dignity is one of the most underestimated elements of attraction. It is visible in how you exit situations, in how you decline offers, in how you disagree, in how you accept mistakes. Dignity keeps your image intact even when circumstances are imperfect, and people remember dignity long after they forget small conflicts. As your awareness deepens, you also recognize that influence is not always loud or visible. Sometimes it is quiet leadership. Others begin mirroring your composure. They adjust their tone when speaking to you. They think more carefully before crossing boundaries. They respect your time because you respect it yourself. This is gravity in action. You do not demand it. You cultivate it. Over time, your presence carries weight without force. Conversations slow slightly when you speak. Disagreements soften. Emotional reactions around you reduce. Because your steadiness influences the emotional climate. And that is the ultimate refinement of these hidden principles. You began by learning how attraction works. You progressed by mastering emotional control. You strengthened your boundaries. You refined your standards. You built independence. You balanced warmth with firmness. You replaced desperation with discipline. Now, you simply live it. There are no visible tactics anymore. Only habits. Only character. Only identity. And identity is the most powerful magnet of all. When someone encounters a person who is internally aligned, whose words match actions, whose emotions are regulated, whose standards are consistent, whose ambition is steady, they feel something rare. They feel certainty. In a world filled with noise, inconsistency, and emotional volatility, certainty is deeply attractive. And when you become certain within yourself, attraction is no longer a question you ask. It is a result you naturally create. That is where the journey quietly ends, not with control over others, but with complete command over yourself. When you reach this final layer of understanding, something becomes very clear: the real game was never outside of you. It was never about decoding others so you could control them. It was about decoding yourself so no one else could control you. And that realization changes everything. You begin to notice how much of human behavior is driven by fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of insignificance. Fear of abandonment. Fear of losing control. When you were unaware of your own fears, they quietly shaped your reactions. They made you chase when you should have paused. They made you argue when you should have observed. They made you cling when you should have walked away. But now, with awareness, fear loses its grip. You no longer rush to fill silence. You no longer explain your intentions. You no longer try to secure guarantees from people who are uncertain themselves. You become comfortable with ambiguity. And comfort with uncertainty is rare strength. Most people need constant reassurance to feel stable. When you do not, your presence feels grounded. You are not shaken by temporary shifts in behavior. You are not destabilized by emotional highs and lows. You operate from a deeper center. This center is built on self-trust. Self-trust means you believe in your ability to handle outcomes, even painful ones. It means you know that if something ends, you will rebuild. If someone leaves, you will recover. If circumstances change, you will adapt. That belief removes panic from your system. And when panic disappears, power increases. You also start seeing that attraction is not about perfection. It is about emotional leadership. Emotional leadership means you set the tone of interactions. If tension arises, you lower it. If drama appears, you refuse to feed it. If excitement grows, you enjoy it without losing control. You guide the emotional climate instead of being swept by it. That is influence at its highest form. Another transformation occurs in how you value time. You no longer waste hours analyzing someone's inconsistent behavior. Inconsistency becomes clarity. Mixed signals become information. Instead of chasing clarity through conversation, you observe patterns. Patterns do not lie. If effort is inconsistent, you adjust your investment. If respect decreases, you reinforce boundaries. If highly intentional, you do not give it freely to every distraction. You invest it where there is growth, reciprocity, and purpose. And because your energy is focused, your presence becomes more impactful. Intensity without direction feels chaotic. Direction without intensity feels passive. But focused intensity, controlled ambition, feels magnetic. People sense when someone is building something meaningful. It creates momentum, and momentum attracts. You also stop mistaking attention for value. Attention is easy to gain. Drama can create it. Charm can create it. Even conflict can create it. But value is different. Value is built slowly through consistency, reliability, and standards. You choose to build value. And when you build value, attention follows naturally, but you are no longer dependent on it. There is also a deeper peace that settles in when you accept that you cannot control how others perceive you. Some will misunderstand you. Some will envy you. Some will project their insecurities onto you. Earlier, that might have unsettled you. Now, it does not. Because your identity is not built on their interpretation. It is built on your principles. Principles simplify decisions. When faced with temptation to react emotionally, you return to your standards. When faced with pressure to compromise your dignity, you return to your principles. This internal framework prevents you from being easily swayed. Stability becomes your default setting. And from stability grows quiet authority. Authority does not always require a title or position. It can exist in any environment. In a room full of loud voices, the calm one often carries the most weight. In a chaotic situation, the composed individual naturally becomes the reference point. That can be you. Not because you demanded it, but because you cultivated the internal qualities that command it. You begin to realize that attraction, respect, and influence are side effects of a disciplined inner life, of managing your impulses, of choosing growth over comfort, of valuing solitude enough to avoid clinging to the wrong company. Solitude, once feared, becomes a tool. It sharpens your thinking. It strengthens your identity. It reminds you that your value does not depend on constant interaction. And when you are no longer afraid of being alone, you stop accepting situations that diminish you. That refusal to accept less elevates your entire life. In the end, the so-called hidden rules were never about manipulation. They were about mastery. Mastery of emotion. Mastery of timing. Mastery of perception. Mastery of boundaries. But above all, mastery of self. Because once you master yourself, no one can easily provoke you, rush you, deceive you, or destabilize you. You move with intention. You speak with precision. You decide with clarity. And people feel that difference. They may not understand it consciously. They may not be able to explain why your presence feels different, but they will feel it. It is the feeling of someone who is not searching, but choosing. Not chasing, but attracting. Not reacting, but leading. And that is where the journey truly completes itself. Not with control over others, but with complete command over who you are. By now, the surface ideas have completely dissolved. What remains is something much deeper and far more powerful than attraction itself. It is identity. When identity becomes solid, attraction becomes secondary. There was a time when you may have measured your value by response. Who replied quickly? Who showed interest? Who gave attention? Who validated your presence? But the most refined stage of growth removes this measurement entirely. You no longer calculate your worth based on reaction. You measure yourself by alignment. Are your actions aligned with your standards? Are your choices aligned with your long-term direction? Are your relationships aligned with your values? When alignment becomes your focus, distractions lose their intensity. You are not tempted by temporary validation because you see beyond the moment. You understand that short-term emotional wins can create long-term instability, and you no longer trade stability for excitement. There is a certain calm dominance that develops when you stop negotiating with your own weaknesses. When laziness appears, you discipline it. When insecurity appears, you examine it. When ego appears, you regulate it. This internal governance creates a personality that feels structured. Structured people feel powerful because they are predictable in principle, even if not predictable in behavior. Your standards do not fluctuate based on who stands in front of you. Your boundaries do not bend because someone is charming. Your discipline does not collapse because someone but unstable. Others are controlled but cold. But when someone can be both emotionally intelligent and emotionally disciplined, their presence carries depth. At this stage, you stop reacting to what people say and start evaluating what they do repeatedly. Words lose their hypnotic effect. Promises lose their emotional pull. You watch patterns instead. Patterns tell you who is serious and who is temporary. This saves you enormous emotional energy. You also begin to understand something critical about power. Real power does not rush. It does not argue loudly. It does not demand recognition. It does not chase acknowledgement. It waits. Waiting is misunderstood. Waiting is not passive. It is controlled patience. It is confidence in your timing. It is trust that forcing outcomes weakens them. When you move with patience, your actions carry more weight. Your silence carries more meaning. Your decisions feel deliberate rather than reactive. People start adjusting around you because your pace subtly becomes the reference point. And here lies a quiet truth: the person who controls their pace controls the interaction. If someone tries to rush you emotionally, you slow down. If someone tries to provoke you, you soften your tone. If someone withdraws to test you, you continue building your life. You do not mirror insecurity. You mirror strength. Over time, this builds an invisible shield. Manipulation fails against patience. Emotional games collapse against indifference to outcome. Pressure dissolves against clarity. You are no longer easily influenced because you are no longer easily shaken. There is also a transformation in how you see rejection. Earlier, rejection may have felt personal. Now it feels directional. If something leaves, it was misaligned. If something fades, it lacked foundation. Instead of resisting loss, you interpret it. Interpretation gives you wisdom instead of wounds. And wisdom changes your entire presence. Your conversations become lighter because you are not carrying hidden anxiety. Your eye contact becomes steady because you are not seeking approval. Your humor becomes natural because you are not performing. Performance disappears. Authenticity replaces it. But this authenticity is not careless expression. It is refined authenticity. You know when to speak and when to hold back. You know when to open up and when to observe. You know when to invest and when to detach. That balance makes you unpredictable in a powerful way. Not unstable, but unshaken. People cannot easily categorize you. You are warm but not naive. Ambitious but not desperate. Kind but not weak. Confident but not arrogant. And that complexity sustains attraction. At this final depth, you realize something even more important. Attraction is not about pulling people toward you. It is about becoming so internally aligned that the right people recognize themselves in your presence. It becomes less about influence and more about resonance. When someone shares your discipline, they respect you. When someone shares your ambition, they admire you. When someone shares your emotional maturity, they feel safe with you. You stop trying to be universally appealing. You focus on being precisely aligned. And precision always beats popularity. Eventually, the need to think about rules fades completely. There is no checklist, no tactics, no calculated pauses. There is only awareness and discipline operating naturally. You respond slowly because that is your rhythm. You enforce boundaries because that is your standard. You pursue growth because that is your identity. And the byproduct of all this is quiet magnetism. Not loud charm. Not dramatic charisma. But gravity. People feel centered around you because you are centered within yourself. And that is the final transformation. You began wanting to know how to attract others. You end by becoming someone who attracts without trying. Not because you mastered others, but because you mastered yourself. And once self-mastery becomes your foundation, nothing external feels out of control anymore. That is where real influence lives. In calmness, in clarity, in character. And when those three become permanent parts of you, attraction is no longer something you learn. It is something you naturally radiate. At the highest level of this journey, something very subtle yet very powerful happens. You stop thinking in terms of attraction altogether. The desire to win people fades. The urge to impress disappears. Even the need to be understood weakens. What replaces all of that is something far more stable: self-possession. Self-possession means you own your emotions before they own you. You own your time before others consume it. When you walk into a room now, you are not scanning for approval. You are not adjusting your personality to match the loudest voice. You are not subtly competing for attention. You are simply present, grounded, observant. Presence is rare. Most people are physically in the room but mentally somewhere else, seeking validation, worrying about perception, replaying old conversations, anticipating future outcomes. But when someone is fully present, their energy feels steady. Conversations with them feel deeper. Eye contact feels calmer. Their words feel intentional. And intentional words carry weight. You begin to understand that influence is less about what you say and more about how you carry silence between sentences. Rushed speech communicates anxiety. Measured speech communicates confidence. When you pause naturally, when you allow space in conversation, you project comfort with yourself. Comfort with yourself signals that you do not need to prove anything. That lack of need is powerful. Neediness repels because it creates pressure. People feel responsible for your emotional state. But when you are emotionally self-contained, interactions feel lighter. Others engage because they want to, not because they feel obligated to manage your feelings. This is where emotional independence turns into emotional leadership. Leadership does not mean dominance. It means stability. If tension arises in a group, you do not escalate it. If gossip circulates, you do not amplify it. If conflict appears, you do not fuel it with ego. You either neutralize it with calmness or disengage entirely. Over time, people associate you with clarity rather than chaos. And clarity attracts trust. Trust is deeper than attraction. Attraction can exist without trust, but trust creates longevity. When someone trusts your emotional consistency, they relax around you. They invest more openly. They speak more honestly. And this deeper exchange builds connections that are not based on surface-level charm. At this stage, you also become highly aware of energy exchanges. You can feel when a conversation drains you. You can sense when someone is seeking validation rather than offering value. You recognize when effort is one-sided. And instead of confronting everything, you adjust quietly. You reduce availability. You lower emotional investment. You redirect attention to growth. No drama. No announcements. This silent recalibration protects your energy while preserving dignity. Another shift happens in how you experience ambition. Earlier, ambition might have been partially fueled by comparison, the need to outshine, to be admired, to prove worth. Now ambition feels cleaner. It is self-directed. You improve because growth is your standard, not because applause is your reward. When growth becomes internal rather than performative, your confidence stabilizes. You are no longer shaken by someone else's success. You are no longer intimidated by someone else's attention. You are building your own foundation. And strong foundations do not compete. They endure. You also begin to see that mystery is not about hiding your flaws. It is about revealing depth slowly. You do not rush vulnerability. You do not expose your entire inner world to someone who has not demonstrated consistency. This pacing increases respect, because access feels earned, and people value what they earn. As your awareness deepens, your reactions become minimal but meaningful. You do not celebrate small wins. You do not overreact to small losses. This emotional moderation creates an image of balance. Balanced individuals are perceived as strong because they do not swing wildly between extremes. This balance also protects you from manipulation. Emotional manipulators rely on provoking reactions, jealousy, insecurity, urgency. But when your baseline is calm, their tactics lose power. You simply observe. Observation replaces reaction, and observation increases intelligence. Intelligent emotional behavior is magnetic because it feels safe. People feel they can engage with you without being judged impulsively or dismissed unfairly. Your steadiness becomes a space where others can reveal themselves honestly. And when people reveal themselves honestly, you gain clarity about who truly aligns with you. That clarity simplifies your life. You stop chasing complex connections. You stop negotiating mismatched values. You stop investing in those who consistently underperform emotionally. You accept that alignment is rare, and that rarity increases value. This acceptance brings peace, and peace is powerful. A peaceful person does not rush love, does not rush decisions, does not rush emotional commitments. They move deliberately, and deliberate movement creates trust. But solid within yourself. Your discipline shapes your days. Your standards shape your relationships. Your clarity shapes your decisions. And because your inner world is ordered, your outer world becomes more controlled. Attraction, respect, and loyalty are no longer goals. They are outcomes. You do not demand them. You do not chase them. You simply embody qualities that naturally generate them. Self-possession, emotional regulation, intentional growth, selective investment, quiet confidence. These are not tactics anymore. They are you. And when these traits become permanent, you stop asking how to attract anyone. You simply live in a way that makes alignment inevitable. That is the final refinement. Not dominance. Not manipulation, but mastery expressed through calm presence. And from that place, influence is no longer something you practice. It is something you quietly become. At this final stage, everything becomes quieter. There is no more obsession with outcomes. No more analyzing every interaction. No more wondering how you were perceived. What replaces all of that noise is internal stillness. And that stillness changes the way the world responds to you. You now understand something most people never fully grasp. Attraction is not created by chasing attention. It is created by building substance. Substance in your thinking. Substance in your habits. Substance in your character. When your life has structure, when your days have direction, when your emotions have regulation, you no longer look outward for stability. You carry it within you. And people are naturally drawn to stability because it feels rare. Most individuals operate from emotional fluctuation. Their confidence rises and falls based on response. Their mood shifts based on messages. Their self-worth changes based on validation. But when someone's internal state remains steady regardless of circumstances, it creates a powerful contrast. That contrast is magnetic. You stop trying to be interesting. You become interested. You stop trying to impress. You focus on improving. You stop trying to control perception. You focus on controlling behavior. And behavior is the only thing you truly own. Once you fully accept that you cannot control how others feel, think, or respond, you experience a strange freedom. That freedom removes tension from your interactions. You speak honestly but calmly. You show interest but without attachment. You express standards but without apology. There is no hidden desperation behind your words. And desperation is what most people sense subconsciously. When desperation disappears, dignity expands. Dignity is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows in how you wait your turn without anxiety. It shows in how you accept rejection without bitterness. It shows in how you disagree without hostility. Over time, people begin to associate you with emotional maturity. They feel that conversations with you are steady. That decisions around you feel thoughtful. That drama does not stick to you. This reputation becomes your invisible advantage. Because reputation travels before you do. When you are known as someone who is composed, selective, and consistent, people approach you differently. They think more carefully before crossing boundaries. They invest more effort when they want your time. They recognize that access to you is not automatic, and that recognition increases your perceived value. But by now, you are no longer thinking in terms of value in a transactional way. You are simply maintaining your standards naturally. What once required conscious effort has become instinct. You no longer force mystery, you value privacy. You no longer calculate silence, you are comfortable with pauses. You no longer practice detachment, you genuinely trust yourself. Trusting yourself is the final pillar. Self-trust means you believe in your ability to navigate uncertainty. You believe you will make wise decisions. You believe you will recover from mistakes. You believe you will survive disappointment without collapsing. This belief removes fear. And when fear reduces, your energy becomes calm. Calm energy feels powerful because it is unhurried. It does not rush into commitments. It does not overpromise. It does not overreact. It assesses, then acts. Action taken from calmness feels deliberate. People trust deliberate individuals because they feel safe in their consistency. You are no longer unpredictable in unstable ways. You are only unpredictable in refined ways, thoughtful, layered, measured. At this level, even your ambition feels different. It is no longer about proving something to someone. It is about honoring your own potential. You wake up focused not because you want attention, but because growth is natural rather than rehearsed. They are respected more easily. When self-respect becomes embedded in your posture, tone, and choices, it does not require explanation. And that is when attraction becomes effortless. Not because you are trying, but because you are aligned. Aligned people are rare. They do not contradict themselves constantly. They do not say one thing and do another. They do not promise what they cannot maintain. Their internal values and external behavior match. That alignment builds credibility. Credibility builds respect. Respect builds attraction. And attraction built on respect lasts longer than attraction built on excitement. At the very end of this journey, you realize something almost ironic. The more you focused on improving yourself, the less you needed strategies for others. The more you strengthened your internal world, the less you worried about external outcomes. You stopped chasing. You stopped proving. You stopped fearing loss. And in doing so, you gained something far more important than influence. You gain control over yourself. From that place, everything becomes simpler. You choose people who choose you. You invest where there is reciprocity. You walk away when standards are not met. You grow regardless of who is watching. This simplicity is powerful, because simplicity reduces emotional chaos. And when chaos is gone, clarity remains. Clarity in who you are. Clarity in what you want. Clarity in what you will not tolerate. And clarity radiates. In the end, the deepest secret was never about manipulating attraction. It was about refining yourself until attraction becomes a natural byproduct of your character. Once character becomes solid, nothing external feels unstable. You move with purpose. You speak with intention. You choose with wisdom. And without ever demanding attention, you command it. That is where the journey closes. Not with tactics. Not with tricks. But with a quiet, disciplined identity that no longer needs to chase anything. Because what is truly valuable never has to. And now, at the very end, everything becomes simple. After all the layers of psychology, emotional control, mystery, discipline, boundaries, and self-mastery, what remains is not a technique, it is a way of being. You realize that the strongest position in any interaction is not dominance. It is composure, not manipulation. It is clarity, not control over others. It is control over yourself. There was a time when attraction may have felt like something external, something you had to create, trigger, or secure. Now you see it differently. Attraction is a response. It is what happens naturally when someone encounters stability in a world full of instability. Most people are reactive. They speak before thinking. They commit before evaluating. They attach before understanding. They panic before observing. When you remove those tendencies from yourself, you immediately stand apart. And standing apart is powerful. You no longer rush intimacy. You allow connection to unfold at a pace that reveals character. You no longer chase attention. You let attention reveal intention. You no longer try to convince anyone of your value. You let consistency demonstrate it. Consistency becomes your silent language. When your mood does not swing wildly, people feel secure around you. When your standards do not change based on convenience, people respect you. When your ambition does not fade because someone doubts you, people admire you. You are no longer loud about who you are. You are steady about who you are. And steadiness creates gravity. At this stage, rejection loses its emotional sting. Not because you are indifferent, but because you are aligned. If someone walks away, it simply means there was misalignment. You do not collapse. You do not chase. You do not dramatize the ending. You adjust. You refine. You continue. There is enormous strength in continuing without bitterness. Bitterness signals attachment to an outcome. Peace signals acceptance of reality. And peace feels powerful. You also stop needing to explain your boundaries. The right people recognize them. The wrong people test them, and quietly remove themselves when they see you will not bend. That is filtering in action. And filtering protects your energy. Energy becomes one of your most protected assets. You no longer give it to gossip, to unnecessary arguments, to endless validation loops. You invest it in growth, in meaningful conversations, in aligned relationships. Your circle becomes smaller, but stronger. Your focus becomes narrower, but deeper. Your ambition becomes quieter, but sharper. And people feel that shift. You no longer seek to be impressive. You seek to be effective. You no longer seek. Desire without respect destabilizes. But when respect comes first, everything else grows naturally from it. You also understand now that mystery is not about secrecy. It is about depth. You are layered. Not immediately readable. Not easily categorized. And that layered personality keeps interactions engaging over time. Yet even this is not intentional anymore. It is simply the result of growth. The more you evolve, the more depth you develop. The more depth you develop, the more intrigue you create. But intrigue is no longer your goal. Peace is. Peace in your decisions. Peace in your standards. Peace in your solitude. Peace in your ambition. When you are at peace with yourself, you stop bargaining with the world. And that is the final transformation. You no longer need to be chosen, because you choose yourself first. You no longer fear being alone, because solitude sharpens you. You no longer fear being misunderstood, because clarity within matters more than clarity outside. You become internally anchored. An anchored person cannot be easily shaken by delayed replies, by mixed signals, by temporary excitement, or by sudden withdrawal. You read patterns. You respond with intention. You detach when necessary. You invest when earned. Everything becomes measured. Measured reactions. Measured trust. Measured vulnerability. And this measured approach makes your presence feel rare. Rare not because you are distant. Rare because you are disciplined. Discipline in emotion. Discipline in speech. Discipline in desire. At the end of it all, the greatest lesson is this: when you build yourself into someone who is stable, self-respecting, purposeful, and emotionally intelligent, attraction is inevitable, but it is no longer your focus. You do not wake up thinking about how to pull people closer. You wake up thinking about how to improve yourself. And improvement creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates calm. Calm creates magnetism. That is the full circle. What started as a search for hidden rules ends as a journey of self-mastery. Not louder, not colder, not manipulative, but clearer. And when clarity defines you, you do not need to chase anyone's attention ever again. Because the strongest position in life is not being the one who wants more. It is being the one who needs less. And when you truly reach this level, life begins to feel lighter. Not because challenges disappear. Not because people suddenly behave perfectly. But because you are no longer internally disturbed by every external shift. Your stability no longer depends on circumstances. You have built something solid inside. Earlier, attraction may have felt like a skill to master. Now it feels like a byproduct of alignment. When your thoughts, actions, values, and goals move in the same direction, there is no internal conflict. And when there is no internal conflict, your energy becomes clean. Clean energy is powerful. There is no hidden agenda in your kindness. No insecurity in your silence. No desperation in your interest. No fear in your boundaries. Everything you do feels intentional because it is rooted in clarity. You understand now that many people try to control others because they cannot control themselves. They try to manipulate emotions because they cannot regulate their own. They seek dominance because they lack internal authority. But when you develop internal authority, external control becomes unnecessary. Internal authority means you decide how you react. You decide how much access someone gets. You decide what behavior you tolerate. You decide when to invest and when to withdraw. This decision-making power restores calmness. Calmness creates perspective. Perspective prevents overreaction. And preventing overreaction preserves power. You also stop romanticizing intensity. Intensity once felt exciting, fast replies, dramatic emotions, overwhelming attention. But now you see that intensity without consistency burns out quickly. You choose steady effort over sudden passion. Because steady effort builds trust. Trust builds safety. Safety builds long-term attraction. At this point, you are no longer tempted by words alone. You watch alignment between words and behavior. You notice who shows up repeatedly, who respects your time, who adjusts when you communicate a boundary. Consistency becomes more attractive than charm. And you model that same consistency yourself. You arrive on time. You keep your promises. You manage your emotions. You speak with intention. These small disciplines compound into a strong identity. And identity is the real magnet. You are no longer trying to be mysterious, but you are not easily decoded either. Your depth unfolds gradually because they either give too much too soon or withdraw completely. They either become overly attached or emotionally unavailable. But you operate in the middle, engaged yet independent. That middle ground is strength. You also learn to appreciate silence, not as distance, but as space. Space allows reflection. Space allows clarity. Space allows others to reveal their true level of investment. When someone values you, they bridge the space. When someone does not, they drift. Either way, you gain information without losing composure. This is emotional intelligence in action. You no longer chase clarity through confrontation. You gain clarity through observation. You no longer force decisions from others. You allow their actions to decide for them. Patience becomes your advantage, and patience signals confidence. Because only someone who trusts their value can afford to wait. By now, you understand that attraction rooted in insecurity fades quickly, but attraction rooted in respect and admiration lasts. And admiration grows when people see that you do not compromise your standards under pressure. Pressure reveals character. If someone distances themselves to test you, you do not panic. If someone attempts to provoke jealousy, you do not react. If someone tries to cross a boundary, you calmly reinforce it. Calm reinforcement is stronger than emotional retaliation. You are no longer in competition with anyone. Not with rivals. Not with former connections. Not with strangers seeking attention. Your only comparison is with your previous self. That internal focus keeps your growth continuous. Growth keeps your life moving forward. Forward motion creates momentum. And momentum is attractive because it signals direction. People are naturally drawn to direction. To those who know where they are going. To those who are building something meaningful. You do not need to announce your goals loudly. Your discipline reveals them. Discipline is visible. It shows in your routine, in your posture, in your tone, in your decisions. Over time, others begin to sense that being connected to you requires growth. And those who are unwilling to grow fall away naturally. This is alignment working quietly. You are no longer filtering aggressively. You are simply living at a standard that filters for you. And that is the most effortless form of influence. When standards are embodied rather than demanded, they attract those who match them and repel those who do not. By the end of this journey, the idea of winning someone feels outdated. There is nothing to win. There is only alignment or misalignment. You do not try to convince anyone to stay. You do not try to persuade anyone to see your value. You focus on becoming so internally structured that those who recognize it choose to remain. And if they do not, you remain steady anyway. Because your peace no longer depends on presence. It depends on principle. Principle-centered living creates a different kind of magnetism, one rooted in self, respect, patience, and emotional regulation. And when you live this way consistently, attraction is no longer something you seek. It is something that quietly surrounds you. Not because you forced it, not because you manipulated it, but because you became someone who does not need it to feel whole. And that is where real power settles. In wholeness. In calmness. In disciplined self-command. From there, everything else becomes optional. By the time you reach this point, you realize something almost ironic. The entire journey that began with the desire to attract others has quietly turned into a journey of becoming complete without them. And that changes the energy of everything. When you are no longer trying to fill a gap inside yourself, your interactions feel different. You are not speaking to impress. You are not listening to respond cleverly. You are not behaving to secure attachment. You are simply engaging, fully, calmly, without hidden urgency. There is no silent fear driving you anymore. And when fear disappears, so does the subtle tension people usually sense in social dynamics. You now understand that most attraction problems were never about looks, status, or clever words. They were about emotional instability, about reacting too fast, investing too quickly, overvaluing people before they proved consistency. Once you correct those patterns within yourself, everything shifts. You begin to notice how powerful restraint is. Not suppression, restraint. The ability to feel something deeply but still choose your response carefully. The ability to want someone but not abandon your standards. The ability to experience disappointment without losing composure. Restraint. At this stage, your standards are no longer negotiable, but they are also not aggressive. You do not threaten people with boundaries. You simply live them. If someone crosses a line, you adjust their access. Calmly, quietly, without drama. This quiet adjustment becomes your language. You do not argue for respect. You respond to disrespect with distance. You do not chase clarity. You observe consistency. This simplicity removes chaos from your life. Chaos thrives where there is emotional overreaction. But when reactions are measured, chaos has no fuel. Another deep shift happens in how you experience connection. You no longer confuse attention with alignment. Just because someone shows interest does not mean they share your values. Just because someone is available does not mean they are disciplined. Just because someone is charming does not mean they are stable. You look for depth. Depth in how they handle stress. Depth in how they speak about others. Depth in how consistent their behavior is over time. And because you operate with depth yourself, shallow connections naturally feel less appealing. You are not harder to impress because you are arrogant. You are harder to impress because you are clear. Clarity sharpens perception. You see patterns earlier. You sense misalignment faster. You recognize emotional immaturity quickly. And instead of trying to fix it, you simply choose differently. Choice becomes your greatest power. Not forcing. Not convincing. Choosing. Choosing where to invest energy. Choosing where to withdraw. Choosing when to speak. Choosing when to remain silent. When you fully embrace the power of choice, you stop feeling trapped in any dynamic. There is also a new kind of confidence that develops, one that does not need to display itself. You no longer seek to dominate conversations. You no longer need the final word in disagreements. You no longer need visible validation. You know your value privately. Private confidence is stronger than public confidence. Public confidence can be performance. Private confidence is identity. And identity does not fluctuate with audience reaction. At this final depth, you also stop fearing endings. Endings no longer feel like personal failures. They feel like natural transitions. Some connections serve a season. Some teach lessons. Some reveal your growth by showing you what you no longer tolerate. Every ending refines you. Instead of reacting emotionally, you reflect strategically. What did this teach me? What pattern did I notice? What standard will I reinforce next time? This reflective approach turns experience into wisdom. And wisdom is attractive in a quiet way. You begin to speak less but say more. Your words carry weight because they are not scattered. Your presence carries calm because it is not searching. Your ambition carries respect because it is not desperate. And slowly, without announcement, you become someone others look toward for emotional reference. If tension rises, your calm lowers it. If confusion spreads, your clarity steadies it. If emotions escalate, your restraint anchors it. You are no longer part of the noise. You are the contrast to it. And contrast is powerful. In a world filled with impulsive reactions, you are measured. In a world filled with oversharing, you are private. In a world filled with chasing, you are selective. This selectiveness is not coldness. It is self-respect. Self-respect changes posture. It changes tone. It changes decisions. It changes the quality of people who remain around you. Eventually, attraction is no longer something you think about at all. You think about growth. You think about discipline. You think about purpose. And as your life becomes fuller with direction, people naturally feel drawn to that fullness. Because most people are searching for direction. When they see someone who has it, they feel curiosity. They feel admiration. They feel a pull. But by now, you are not concerned with being pulled toward or pulling others toward you. You are centered. And being centered is the highest form of power. You no longer need to win anyone. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to control outcomes. You simply continue building yourself, stronger, calmer, clearer. And in doing so, you embody the ultimate principle that was hidden beneath every rule. The less you need validation, the more valuable you become. The less you chase, the more you attract. The more you master yourself, the less anyone can destabilize you. And when no one can destabilize you, you move through life with quiet authority. That is the true end of this journey. Not control over hearts. Not domination over minds. But complete command over yourself. And from that command, everything else follows naturally.